The 2020 NHL trade deadline is on February 24th, so it's a little bit over a month away, and I think it's only a matter of time before we really start to see the trade market heat up. I mean, we already saw one of the bigger name players in the league traded in Taylor Hall when he was moved to Arizona, and there still is some pretty decent names on the board that are going to be prime targets come the deadline. So for today's video, I want to talk about 6 trades that should happen this season. Not trades that I think will happen or could happen, trades that I think should happen. And I don't usually set like goals for videos, but let's try to hit 650 likes for this one. And as always, if you guys are new and have been enjoying the content, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to turn on notifications so that you never miss a video. The first one I want to talk about, I kind of spoiled it by the thumbnail, so I'll just get it out of the way now, and that is the Calgary Flames acquiring Tyler Toffoli from the Los Angeles Kings. Obviously, the LA Kings are kind of in a rebuilding stage right now. I don't really see them finishing anywhere near the playoffs come the end of the year. And obviously, I think a team that is trying to compete could use Tyler Toffoli's services a lot more than the LA Kings could right now. He's a 27-year-old winger, has a cap hit of $4.6 million through this season. He's going to be a UFA this summer, and he's having an okay year. He's got 12 goals and 15 assists for 27 points in 45 games, but I think if he were on a contender playing in a top 6 role for a better team, he would definitely have a lot better numbers. And Calgary is a team that recently freed up a good amount of cap space when they traded away Michael Frolik, and their GM Brad Trevling said that he tends to use that cap space to hopefully improve the team in hopes of having a strong second half of the season. He also did say that he was freeing up some room for guys like Andrew Mangiapane and Dylan Dubé to move up the lineup, but I think if they can get a win now piece like Tyler Toffoli, they definitely prefer to do that. Now, in terms of what the Calgary Flames would give up for Tyler Toffoli, I'm not quite sure, and I'm also not even quite sure what LA's asking price. I'm not sure if they get a first round pick in return for him. It depends on who their trade partner is. I'm thinking more of like a decent young player who could use a fresh start maybe, or like a B-level prospect and a second round pick or something like that. I think will get the job done. A guy like Mark Jankowski of the Calgary Flames, a 25-year-old who was a former first-round pick for the team, is having an abysmal season. He doesn't have a goal yet in 37 games and has just 1 assist. He's a minus 13, and boy, could he ever use a fresh start somewhere else, but his value's at an all-time low. So yeah, I'm not exactly quite sure what the return package would look like, but I definitely think Tyler Toffoli to the Calgary Flames is something that should happen either before or at the trade deadline. Calgary's offense really hasn't been good this year. They're 25th in goals scored per game, so I definitely think a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who has like 20 to 25, maybe even 30 goal potential, would help their depth scoring a lot and slot into their top 6 nicely. Next up, I definitely think the Winnipeg Jets should look into acquiring a top 4 defenseman. Who that defenseman may be, I'm not quite sure. I got a couple of names I want to go over. The first being defenseman Alec Martinez for the LA Kings. It's similar to Tyler Toffoli where they really don't need him right now. They're a rebuilding team, and I think Alec Martinez definitely could be used a lot better with a team that is trying to win right now. And when you look at the Winnipeg Jets decor on paper, sure, they've done a decent job, but man, is it just so tough to look at. Josh Morrissey and Neil Pionk definitely could use a little bit more help. Martinez is a 32-year-old defenseman. He's at a cap hit of $4 million through the 2020-21 season, so this wouldn't just be a rental for Winnipeg. He's got 6 points and is a -3 this year in 28 games, so he has been injured a little bit, but if the Jets could get a guy like him for a good deal, I definitely think it would benefit the team. The next defenseman I want to talk about is Andy Green of the New Jersey Devils, who will be a UFA this summer. He is definitely an older guy, but I think he is still capable of playing on like a second pairing and just being a good solid veteran presence back there for the Jets. Andy Green is currently 37 years old. He's got a cap hit of $5 million, which seems like a lot for a guy like him, but this would just be a rental. His contract is up at the end of the season. He's got 5 points in 39 games, all of which are assists, but with Andy Green, you gotta remember, it's not all about the numbers with him. Obviously, I think it would be more so just to bring in like a veteran presence that a lot of the Winnipeg Jets defensemen could learn from. So he's definitely a name that came to mind. The next is defenseman TJ Brodie for the Calgary Flames. Obviously, Brodie would be a massive help to Winnipeg, but he definitely would cost them a little bit more than a guy like Andy Green or Alec Martinez would. Maybe you could give them like Logan Stanley and a second round pick or something like that, or maybe even a roster player if that's what Calgary's looking for, which they probably are because they are a team that wants to compete right now. Brodie's 29 years old. He's got a cap hit of $4.65 million, but he will be a UFA at the end of the year. He's got 14 points this season in 40 games, a +5 rating. He definitely is having a pretty decent year, and like I said, just looking at that Winnipeg decor, anything would help, and TJ Brodie would definitely be a massive help for them. And now the last defenseman I want to talk about for Winnipeg is one that would probably cost them the most, and that is Shane Gostisbehere, just because we know what he's capable of. He's had like a 60-point season for a defenseman, and he still isn't old by any means. He's only 26 years old. He currently has a cap hit of $4.5 million per season. He's signed through the 2022-23 year, so this definitely wouldn't be a rental at all for Winnipeg. This would be someone to help them long term. And Gostisbehere definitely has had his name in trade talks a good amount this season. He's got 5 goals and 7 assists for 12 points this year. He was a healthy scratch on numerous occasions, and I personally still believe that he could definitely use a fresh start somewhere else. With Winnipeg's cap situation, I'm honestly not quite sure the likelihood of any of these guys going there, but I definitely think they need to make some upgrades on the blue line, and a lot of it definitely does rely upon if Dustin Byfuglien returns to the team this year, because obviously that would be a massive help in itself. But also, if he doesn't return, that would leave them with a good amount of cap space to go work out a move to bring in someone else. The next trade I want to talk about is another one that was spoiled by the thumbnail, and that is Detroit acquiring Jesse Pulkkinen. By now, we all know the situation with Pulkkinen. He's not going to return to the NHL unless he's traded. He doesn't want to make a return to the Oilers organization whatsoever, and he wants to be traded to a team where he gets an opportunity to play in a top 6 role, which definitely is a lot to demand, but I think in Detroit he would definitely get an opportunity to play in the top 9 at least, and get some power play minutes too. Pulkkinen was a former 4th overall pick by the Edmonton Oilers. He's currently 21 years old. He doesn't have a cap hit because he doesn't have a contract right now. He's an RFA. Obviously, Edmonton owns his rights. His numbers this year in the Liga, in 34 games, he's got 13 goals and 18 assists for 31 points, so it definitely is nice to see him producing good numbers over there, you know, just to get his confidence up, and hopefully some GMs see him playing well over there, and maybe that'll make them want to take a shot to bring him in their organization. You never want to see stuff like this happen, a young player just not work out at all at the NHL level, someone who is a top pick. Obviously, Jesse Pulkkinen can't play in the NHL this season, but the trade could happen this year. He could be a piece involved in a move around the trade deadline or something like that, and the reason I have Detroit as the team acquiring him is because he would get the most opportunity there, in my opinion, than anywhere else in the NHL. I think he'd be guaranteed at least a top 9 role, maybe not top 6 like he wants, but top 9 for sure. And Detroit, I think, definitely does have some interesting pieces that maybe the Edmonton Oilers would be interested in. A guy like Andreas Athanasiou, who is having a really bad year in Detroit, I think he could benefit from a fresh start. Ken Holland knows him well, and could you imagine Athanasiou's speed on a wing with Connor McDavid? That would be deadly. Sure, Athanasiou's trade value is definitely a lot higher than Pulkkinen right now, so Edmonton would probably have to throw in something else, but that could be something that works. Maybe they would be interested in a guy like Luke Glendening, who could come in and play in the bottom 6, or a rental defenseman like Mike Green or Trevor Daley. Obviously, it's kind of hard to just predict a random trade out of left field, but Jesse Pulkkinen being traded to Detroit is honestly something I could see happening. Next up, I want to talk about Toronto acquiring a backup goaltender. I'm not going to spend too much time on it just because it's something that so many people have heard about just throughout the entire season, and even though Hutchinson has picked up a couple of wins of late, I still don't think they trust him as a backup. I want to talk a little bit about Alex Georgiev. He has been a name that has kind of been tied to the Toronto Maple Leafs over the past couple of weeks, and actually that would be a really good option. It would be a cheap option as well, and maybe they give up a guy like Kasperi Kapanen or something like that, and maybe they get Chris Kreider as a return in the deal too. But the Rangers definitely could afford to trade Georgiev just because they have Igor Shesterkin, who I think is going to be a stud. Another goaltender that kind of came to my mind is actually Jimmy Howard of the Detroit Red Wings. He's going to be a UFA this summer, and sure, his numbers are awful. I definitely would trust him as a backup goaltender over Michael Hutchinson. A big reason why Howard's numbers are awful is because he plays on one of the worst teams in recent memory. He does have a relatively hefty cap hit, so Toronto would have to give some money off the other way. Maybe a guy like Cody Ceci. I don't know. I'm kind of just throwing stuff at a wall right now and hoping it sticks. And then the last goaltender I want to talk about is Keith Kincaid. He has had a couple of good years in the NHL in his career. He's currently on the Montreal Canadiens and has spent some time in the American Hockey League, but even him I would trust more so as a backup than Michael Hutchinson. So off the top of my head, those are just a couple of goaltenders that I could see them maybe trying to go out and acquiring. Make sure to let me know down in the comment section below if you think the Leafs are going to address this issue, but yeah, I'm not quite sure who specifically they would get, but I think them acquiring a backup goaltender is something that should happen this year. And now to finish out the video, the last trade that I think should happen is the Pittsburgh Penguins trading away Alex Galchenyuk. To who and for what, I'm honestly not quite sure, but I think the Alex Galchenyuk experiment in Pittsburgh really just hasn't worked out. Galchenyuk is a 25-year-old winger. He's got a cap hit this season of $4 million, but he will be a UFA this summer, so he could be a pretty useful rental for some teams, I think. And like I said, he's having a really bad year. Just 4 goals in 35 games, 14 total points, and he really just hasn't been able to fit in Pittsburgh whatsoever. Some possible destinations, I think of the Edmonton Oilers. I think he could get an opportunity to play a winger role in the top 6, some really talented centermen. Maybe that could really boost him up this year. I have seen a couple of fellow Red Wings fans as well throwing out the idea of an Athanasiou for Galchenyuk swap, and honestly, considering how bad Athanasiou has been this year, I wouldn't be opposed to it. The only thing about that is Athanasiou is going to be an RFA, and Galchenyuk is going to be a UFA, and honestly, I think if Galchenyuk were in Detroit, he would want to test the open market, because really, what reason would he have to stay in Detroit? So Galchenyuk is definitely a name I think we're going to hear a lot about around the trade deadline, and I definitely think there should be a couple of teams interested in him. He has had a 30-goal season before. We know what he can do. He really just is having an awful year. So in my opinion, the Pittsburgh Penguins trading away Alex Galchenyuk this season is something that we should see happen. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think these players should be traded, or are there some other players in the NHL that I didn't mention in this video that you think should be traded this year? And with all that being said, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in tomorrow's video.